happy to welcome back Sean and Alexandre to this panel, but I would also like to introduce a few others. Elizabeth from Loundoun County, who is the Chief Information Security Officer there. Meredith Stickle from who's the Senior Director in Infrastructure and Information Security Enablement, and Jason Smallwood, who's an Enterprise Cloud Architect and has worked in security as well. So welcome to all of you. Yes, I'm seeing in the comments, Green DevSec FinOps is going to be trending for a while. So all of you have a bit of a background in information security or IT security. I guess, Elizabeth, let me start with you. How do you see FinOps and security align today in your organization? And others can jump in on that as well.
So I think, honestly, the trick is to align FinOps and security through security investments. And I'll say it again, you need to tie your security capabilities to the business value chain. You know, security capabilities are aligned to the business need if you do that correctly, which does allow you to effectively manage cost optimization when you implement security measures. So that's really what I think it is about. FinOps and security alignment considers all kinds of things like incident response and financial impacts, all of that. If there's a security event or breach, we must be prepared to understand the financial impact while also managing the response. And that is what FinOps is all about.
Yeah. Is that a similar, any of you others have a similar take on that or seeing that in your organizations?
You know, very similar at our organization at McAfee. We've aligned FinOps and security mainly through some of the governance boards that we have to make sure that we are all streamlined and aligned on how we are managing public cloud from a cost perspective and from a security perspective, because they go hand in hand. I mean, you can talk about lifecycle management in cloud, which shutting down instances, reducing your attack surface, that's good for security, and it's good for your spend, right? And reducing your costs. So we've done the alignment largely through our governance forums.
Right, and I think that FinOps is a function of governance, so that totally makes sense to me, Meredith.
Yeah. Is that I guess, Meredith, to build on that, how important is, how do you balance that, the managing cost versus the managing risk? I mean, that's IT security, I guess, is mostly about controlling risk for the organization, but how do you balance that with the need or the desire to go faster and innovate and, you know, get out in the marketplace more quickly?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think, you know, as a security company, security and managing risk is always a top priority, but it's a balancing act, right? You've got to make sure you're maintaining your financial targets and your budget. So some of the ways that we do this balancing act is definitely driven from FinOps. If we can find a place where we can optimize on spend, just as an example, we looked at our cloud architecture and saw that we were over provisioned on our native firewalls that we were using. And so we took an architecture initiative to reevaluate and to figure out how can we save on cost and maintain the same level of security. And we were able to do that with a significant savings. And with that savings, you know, we give some back to the central bucket, but we put some towards enhancing some of our other security initiatives that we needed to drive, whether that was enabling, and we're primarily AWS, enabling more guard duty functionality or enhancing our EDR. But when you can show, hey, we've saved the X amount, you can put a certain amount towards security. And that's where our CCOE comes into play, because we make those decisions there with our finance partners and our cross-functional BU stakeholders.
Okay, so you're doing sort of that similar kind of review of each project as they come through with the multifunctional group.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's like, because you can't just enable more security, you can't just keep purchasing more security, right? You've got to balance it. You've got to save somewhere to put it elsewhere.
Right, you've got to absolutely tie it to the business need. I keep saying that. You've got to map capabilities to what you're doing.
Gotcha. Jason, let me invite you in. Can you give us an example of cloud governance management automation that's sort of aligned with security that's also helping FinOps that you've seen?
So a couple different ones that I've seen were removing public endpoints when they weren't in use, either decommissioning the resources or destroying the resources. Also isolating workloads when there's an anomaly in usage or there's a security attack. That can help lower consumption based on how the resource is billed.
Yeah, I think, Alexandre, Jean, in your talk, you talked about the blast radius idea there, and I guess that would go to sort of controlling that.
Yes, you can control the blast radius by enforcing some automation. For example, as Jason said, you can enforce in some functions that will isolate some instances, but you can also make some other automatization through the tools that you use. For example, in security, we use CSPM tools. And in these tools is also some automation in terms of security that can be applied on FinOps side. For example, tagging. For example, if as Jason said, if an instance go, I would say crazy, so will consume all the CPU, you can so automatically shut down the instance or reduce so the CPU size to make sure that they will not spend all your budget just on one instances.
We've done automations in the past at an organization I was with, where when attacks or anomalies started to occur, we would shut traffic off to that resource.
And you're doing that based on detection of the anomaly, or based on violation of budgets, or how are you doing that mechanism wise?
It would be that was based on security anomalies.
Okay.
For the most part, but you could also do that off of usage as well.
Yeah, anomaly detection has always seemed to me to be the clearest capability, that where there's a direct tie between the CISO's organization and the FinOps organization, because there've been lots of stories where the cost anomaly was the first thing that was noticed before an actual break-in or breach was noticed as well. There were a lot of I'm kind of going off script here, but there were a lot of questions in the chat during the governance presentation about tools. I know that tools, the security teams are kind of famous for having a variety of tools to get defense in depth, to be able to see, have different vectors of looking at the data and looking at how we do things. Is there do you all see a combining of those, or the FinOps teams and security teams using kind of the same set of tools, or the same kind of data lakes full of information to do their jobs more effectively, or where do you see the tool environment going?
So I think it's an interesting topic. Part of my team manages all of our security tools for the company. I also manage the FinOps team. So I was interested to see the other day in our CSPM tool that they started building in cost optimization directly into our CSPM tool. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. It's not as advanced as your traditional like Cloud Health or Flexera or other tools. But I mean, if you think about what they're doing, they're ingesting the same data. And so you can come to the same conclusions. So it is interesting how some of these security players are entering the FinOps space, because the data is very similar as to what they're ingesting.
We're seeing more in that too, where the tools are combining and adding those new features. So probably not surprising that the security tools are heading in that same direction. Alexandre, we've heard stories of sort of anomaly alerts detecting non-compliance or security breaches. Are there any examples of those that you could talk about?
Yeah, that's a great question. We had in your previous experience an anomaly from SAP workloads, and that trigger a cost anomaly. So it was a FinOps tool that detect the anomaly. It was a native from the cloud service provider tool. And to understand what was behind that, we send, as usual, the anomaly to the product owner. So this part of the triage. So it's a product owner that does the triage because he knows what is running. And on that, they come back to us and ask us to provide them with more insight. On the FinOps part, we weren't really able to do that. So we rely on also SecOps tools. For example, there was one with one that analyzes the flow log between VPC. And that was really helpful to deep dive from what instances the anomaly came from. And on that, they deep dive and understand that was in the end an agent that was triggering all that data outside this instance. But Yes, so part of the anomaly triage, it will be on the FinOps side, we push the anomaly to the tenant, the product owner, and it's their responsibility to understand what costs are based on their workload, and also to respond all on the security side. So it's basically to delegate the responsibility to the product owner that we manage to do this kind of triage. And also because in your previous experience, John and I were under the same team, it is a lot to communicate between the FinOps part and the security part, because we are under the same team.
Yeah, it sounds like that's a best practice from all of you, that where your IT or your FinOps teams and your IT security teams are working very closely together. And I guess that would be much harder in an organization where they're not, where they're more siloed and more separated. So first principle of FinOps, collaboration is important, right? I guess I wanted to get your, so all of you are in some way related to IC security. I wanted to just ask kind of a question to everybody on the panel, and that is, as IT security folks, what would be your, we have a lot of FinOps folks on the call today, what would be your ask to FinOps teams, like just thinking strictly from an IT security perspective, what would be your ask from FinOps teams to help you do your job, help you do the security function more quick, better, that sort of thing? I don't know who wants to start. Elizabeth, maybe you can start us off.
I would say FinOps can help us by understanding the break glass kind of moments that we might have in security. How do you keep costs for that down? If you do have a break glass moment, how would that tie into FinOps principles? But again, I go back to tying it to the business need. If you have your break glass scenarios mapped already in practice, it shouldn't be that hard, but you never really know, right? So I would just considering more scenarios like that.
And just leveraging your comments, Elizabeth, about tying it back to the business. And that's really my call to action also, is on the cloud governance forums. As a FinOps professional, if you're haven't started taking lead on a FinOps board or equivalent, to work with your business unit partners and how they can optimize costs, track that spend, I think you absolutely should, because then that also helps out the InfoSec and IT teams as well on what those savings might be. So that would be my call to action, is on the cloud governance, aligning with your business stakeholders, and meeting on a regular frequency.
Yeah, collaboration. I agree.
So yeah, that's a line. So basically, both of the practice need to collaborate. We cover in our talk, for example, the onboarding part, when we onboard a product owner to the cloud. So it's a good way to see what the cloud security is doing, and also for the security part to see how FinOps is doing also at the enterprise. So it's a good way to find ways to collaborate together on the business side. Okay.
I've got a couple of questions that came in from the chat that I'll, if you're game, I'll just throw out here. One of you mentioned, or several of you mentioned, tagging earlier. One of the questions was, how can our tagging and account separation strategies, hierarchy strategies, help with both FinOps and InfoSec? Any examples of how those tie together?
One example I can think of is tagging resources with the exceptions. So if you track exceptions for, say, a CIS control, when those recommendations come up from the different platforms, that's less recommendations that your teams will have to sift through and review.
Interesting. So okay, so if a particular resource is non-compliant, it's non-compliant, then you don't have to investigate it every time because
correct,
for time saving. Yeah, great.
Yeah, and just to add to that from a security angle, so we're building out our tagging policy, but we have mandatory security tags for patch management. So for more our Elastic workloads, we've tagged them as cattle. If they are up longer than a predefined amount of time, we can shut them down, which is good from a cost perspective. It's good from a security perspective. So that's just one angle that we have today with tagging. Yeah,
that's a great one too. Yeah, it's important to note tagging is used for all kinds of things, operations and security and everything, including FinOps. So even when you have cost allocation tags, sometimes they're useful. It's also one of the things we recommend in the intercycling frameworks. Capability is, make friends with these different organizations and steal their stuff. Oftentimes, the security team already has a good taxonomy for identifying and categorizing things in the infrastructure. So it's easier to use those same terms and to maybe steal existing tags than to go and force tags on other people as well. I had another question about an example of cloud cost management activities that were advocated by FinOps that have also helped security. So I think we talked about tagging, we talked about discounts, but any other things that the FinOps team is doing or that are FinOps activities that have helped you in security shops?
Going back to my initial comment about the lifecycle management and the cleanup of the environment, I think it's FinOps related, it's cost savings, but it's beneficial for security from the attack surface perspective and reducing that surface.
Yeah, I agree that you just have to map your tools to the capability, and that's how you definitely reduce your attack surface.
Snoozing VMs, that reduces the attack surface as well, and some consumption.
Although I will add to that, it's kind of a double-edged sword. We wanted individuals to use the spot instances or only have their instances turned on at a certain time or shut them off during the weekend. Well, we do a lot of patching activities over the weekend. So if the instances are shut off for a FinOps perspective, that can negatively affect our patch management activities. So it's interesting how you navigate both of those.
That's interesting. Is that so? When you're managing the process, I guess if you're using you have your resources being treated like like cattle, not like pets, as the old saying goes, or like carrots, not like bonsais. If you're a vegetarian, then you're kind of updating your images, right? Are you updating a lot of the image source? Then the new resources that get spawned after that, or they get turned back up after that, are compliant coming up?
Yeah, it's a bigger issue with the pets, right? The cattle, you're pulling the latest images, so that's okay, but it's the pets, the ones that are long standing, or whatever the vegetarian term was that I probably should start using. But it's the pets, the ones that they're just shutting down over the weekend to realize the cost savings that we're running in, that we've recently run into the issue of why aren't these getting patched? Oh, good job saving on cost, but
right.
Let's figure out a new schedule for when we can get them patched.
Right. So then you would have to adapt your patching schedule to the cost.
Yeah, exactly.
Or introduce the automation to sort of rehydrate those so that they can be patched. There was a specific question here as well, and I don't know whether anybody wants to take this, but how do we build security governance around third-party licenses used for containers or for edge devices? Has anybody tackled that challenge?
We just treat it as our standard vuln management process with the container scans. Like the VM tool that we have runs the container scans as well. So it's just part of that process.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, containers are complex in a bunch of different ways, but I guess security isn't just another one where they are. Okay. Any last questions or comments from anybody? I really appreciate all of you being here to talk to us about how security and FinOps relate to one another.
JR here from the FinOps Foundation. Thank you for watching. Please go to FinOps.org if you want to get plugged into this amazing community. And of course, hit subscribe right here on YouTube to get all the future content. Hope to see you soon.